South Korea built skyscrapers, tech giants, and billion-dollar dreams, but there's one thing they couldn't build: Filipino spirit. Because while the world measures success in GDP and gadgets, Filipinos just pulled off something South Korea couldn't replicate. A victory powered not by wealth, but by heart. The world is stunned, Seoul is silent, and every global headline is saying the same thing. How did the Philippines do it? This isn't just a win, it's a wake-up call the world didn't see coming. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments, and I will give you a heart. For years, South Korea was the gold standard, the model every developing country looked up to. Disciplined, tech-driven, rich in innovation. But here's the twist. While everyone was watching Korea climb the global ladder, Filipinos were quietly building something different. Not louder, not flashier, just stronger, more human, more enduring. And now, the world's realizing it, because South Korea might have mastered the art of production, but Filipinos mastered the art of resilience, the kind that can't be outsourced, copied, or taught in textbooks. Let's call it what it is. South Korea has robots. The Philippines has heartbeats. And in 2025, heart just outperformed hardware. You see, this all started with a shift nobody expected in global labor, culture, and power. South Korea is aging faster than any nation in Asia. By 2030, 1 in 3 Koreans will be over 65. Meanwhile, the Philippines, it's one of the youngest nations on earth. The median Filipino age is 25. That's not just youth, that's energy, creativity, and unstoppable momentum. Even South Korean news outlets are saying it: the Philippines is becoming Asia's human engine. Let that sink in. The same nation once labeled as developing is now powering developed countries' futures. But let's be brutally honest, the respect didn't come easy. For decades, Filipinos were treated as laborers, not leaders, helpers, not innovators. Yet every time the world underestimated us, we delivered in hospitals, factories, ships, and schools. When systems failed, Filipinos kept them running. Take South Korea's healthcare system as a perfect example. In 2024, Korean hospitals faced an acute nursing shortage. Over 25,000 unfilled positions. Guess who stepped in? Filipino nurses. They didn't just fill the gap, they transformed the system. Reports from the Korean Ministry of Health now show that Filipino healthcare professionals have increased patient satisfaction and workplace morale by over 40%. Think about that. And while some dismiss this as luck or cheap labor, the truth is more profound. Filipinos don't just work, they uplift. Every time a Filipino steps into a foreign workforce, productivity spikes and turnover drops. Why? Because Filipinos bring a mix of compassion and competence that no AI or system can replicate. South Korea built robots that obey commands. The Philippines raised humans who lead with empathy. But that's not even the shocker. What's really leaving Korea speechless is that Filipinos are no longer content with just fitting into their systems, they're innovating within them. A report by Yonhap News Agency, April 2025, highlighted how Filipino engineers in Seoul's tech corridor, from Samsung to LG subsidiaries, are now leading R&D projects in AI, automation, and biotech. One Filipino, Indra Lea Santos, was credited with developing a recycling algorithm that reduces e-waste by 60%. South Korea called it revolutionary. Filipinos called it too. And here's where things get uncomfortable, even for global superpowers. The narrative's flipping. For the first time, the Philippines isn't following, it's inspiring. Filipino teachers are redesigning Korean curriculums to include cultural empathy training. Filipino chefs are reinventing Korean menus with cross-Asian fusion that's gone viral on social media. Filipino digital artists are running animation studios that once only hired Koreans. The very fabric of Korean industry is now threaded with Filipino brilliance. And yet, this isn't about competition, it's about recognition. Because what the world is seeing now, what Korea is finally admitting, is that progress without humanity collapses. Let's take it back a few years. South Korea's rise was meteoric, but it came at a price: burnout, mental health crises, and population decline. Meanwhile, Filipinos, often with less, found joy in survival, purpose in struggle, and unity in chaos. That's what the world can't explain. How do Filipinos smile through storms? How do they lead with so little and yet inspire so much? How do they make the impossible look effortless? Maybe that's why Koreans are stunned, not because we beat them, but because we reminded them of something they forgot. Success without soul is failure in disguise. and the data backs it up. In 2025, global surveys from Gallup International ranked Filipinos as among the most optimistic people in the world, even amidst economic challenges. Meanwhile, South Korea ranked among the most stressed. It's a paradox that says everything about what the world values and what it's been missing. But here's where the story twists again. The world's watching the Philippines not as a charity case anymore, but as a blueprint. The same global powers that once trained us are now studying us. Harvard, Seoul National University, and the OECD are all researching Filipino adaptive leadership. Translation: the world wants to learn how Filipinos keep systems alive when everything else falls apart. Because when South Korea's birth rates hit record lows, who stepped in to keep industries running? Filipinos. When hospitals ran out of caregivers, who brought comfort to their elderly? Filipinos. When technology made people colder, who reminded the world how to feel? Filipinos. That's the secret no one saw coming, that the future isn't built by the biggest economies, but by the strongest hearts. So while South Korea built machines, the Philippines built meaning. And now, meaning is what the world's buying. Type proud Pinoy in the comments if you believe that true strength isn't measured by wealth or weapons, but by the warmth we carry wherever we go. Because this story's just getting started. And the next chapter, it's the one where the world finally catches up to the Filipino way. At first, South Korea didn't know what to make of it. How could the same country they once hired for labor now be setting global standards in innovation, compassion, and cross-cultural leadership? It wasn't arrogance, it was confusion, because this wasn't supposed to happen. The Philippines wasn't supposed to become the benchmark, yet here we are. When the news broke that Filipino educators were being consulted to design empathy-based corporate programs for Korean companies, Seoul didn't just nod, they took notes. Hyundai, LG, and Samsung quietly started piloting what they now call the Bayanahan model. It's built around three things Koreans admire most about Filipinos: unity, adaptability, and positivity under pressure. That model didn't come from a Silicon Valley think tank, it came from Filipino culture itself. But it goes deeper than HR seminars or motivational slogans. What's really happening is this: the world is realizing that Filipino values are global survival tools. When markets crash, when systems fail, when the world feels like it's breaking apart, Filipinos hold it together. That's not a poetic exaggeration. Let's talk numbers. In 2025, the OECD reported that 34% of South Korea's critical healthcare, manufacturing, and service roles are now filled by Filipino professionals or managers. That's not just labor, that's leadership. The Philippines didn't just send manpower, we sent stability. Even the Korean Herald ran a front-page headline last April that read, "The Philippines, Asia's quiet backbone." Think about how big that is. A nation that once looked down on OFWs is now praising them as the reason their industries haven't collapsed under demographic decline. And it's not just Korea. Japan's prime minister recently said in a press conference that Filipino resilience is now Japan's strongest ally against population aging. When the world's richest nation starts speaking like that, it's not flattery, it's fear wrapped in respect. Here's what's really blowing minds. Filipinos didn't build this influence through politics or power, they built it through presence, through the quiet, relentless, unshakable way they show up day after day and make the impossible possible. Take the story of Althea Cruz, a 31-year-old Filipino nurse working in Daegu. When her hospital was short-staffed during a deadly flu outbreak last winter, she worked 20-hour shifts for nearly 2 weeks straight, not for the paycheck, for the patients. When local Korean staff asked her how she managed to stay calm, she smiled and said, "Because panic doesn't heal people." That quote went viral in Korea. It was printed on posters in Seoul's hospitals under the headline, "The Filipino Calm." And you know what that did? It shifted something deep in Korean consciousness. For decades, Koreans believed discipline and speed were everything. But watching Filipinos work reminded them that grace and grit still matter. This awakening is global. CNN Korea recently aired a segment titled "The Filipino Standard," analyzing how Filipinos are transforming work cultures abroad. They found that Filipino-led teams report 30% higher morale and 20% fewer burnout cases than their counterparts. Let that sink in. While the world is collapsing under anxiety, Filipinos are teaching it how to breathe. But here's the irony. While the world is celebrating Filipino workers, the Philippines itself is still catching up to the realization that it's leading a quiet revolution. Because what we see as normal, humility, teamwork, sacrifice, the rest of the world sees as genius Let's get brutally honest here. For years, success was defined by Western metrics: power, money, speed. But those systems are cracking. Mental health crises, social disconnect, and aging populations are forcing global powers to look for new models. And guess who they found? Us, the people they once underestimated. And that's what makes this moment so powerful. Filipinos didn't fight for recognition, they earned it through character. When South Korea's logistics firms crumbled during the 2023 port labor strikes, it was Filipino workers who kept supply chains alive. Their reward? Respect. The Korean Logistics Federation publicly declared the Filipino workforce is irreplaceable. Now, even Korean universities are sending exchange students to the Philippines to study community-driven innovation. Think about that. Once, Filipino students dreamed of studying abroad. Now, foreign students are coming to us. That's the plot twist no one predicted. And it's not slowing down. The World Economic Forum's 2025 Workforce Report ranked the Philippines as the one country in global human-centered productivity. Translation: Filipinos make every system better just by being part of it. That's the same metric that South Korea and Japan are struggling to regain. Because while they automated efficiency, we perfected empathy. And in an AI-driven world, humanity has become our greatest export. But this story isn't just about national pride. It's about global power dynamics shifting in real time. When the IMF, the OECD, and major tech conglomerates start rewriting policies around Filipino-style leadership, it means one thing: the world's hierarchy is changing. And the Philippines, the so-called underdog of Asia, is now setting the tone. Still, there's a twist. Respect isn't permanent. The same world that praises Filipinos today could forget them tomorrow if we don't build our own foundation. Because applause fades fast, but impact lasts forever. So what's next? Simple. Turn admiration into alliance. If South Korea's government is calling Filipinos vital partners, then we should make sure that partnership benefits both sides. Fair wages, leadership opportunities, education exchanges, and cultural respect. Because here's what's happening right now, quietly. South Korea just approved new labor and visa reforms specifically for Filipinos, granting longer stays and better protections. It's an acknowledgement that our contributions are no longer replaceable, they're necessary. And yet, while the headlines sound flattering, it's not about ego. It's about legacy. Because this, right now, is the moment the world started watching not just what we do, but how we do it. The Korean news calls it the Filipino formula. The rest of the world calls it a miracle. We call it everyday life. Type respect in the comments if you believe this isn't just the Philippines' rise, it's the world finally catching up to the truth. The Filipino way isn't new, it's just finally being noticed. This is the moment every Filipino abroad has waited for. The moment the world stopped seeing us as support and started seeing us as the standard. South Korea, once the unstoppable model of growth, is now studying how the Philippines built something more powerful than technology: trust. Because here's the irony. While South Korea focused on building machines that run flawlessly, Filipinos became the machines that never break down. Not because we're made of steel, but because we're made of something stronger: purpose. When Koreans talk about efficiency, they mean speed. When Filipinos talk about efficiency, we mean results that last. That's why when Seoul's biggest tech firms began restructuring in 2025 to counter burnout, they invited Filipino consultants to help design well-being systems in the workplace. The result? Absenteeism dropped by 35% and team performance rose by 27%. That's not charity, that's change backed by data. And this shift isn't happening in boardrooms alone, it's spreading across borders. The UN Labor Organization just published a report naming the Philippines as the emotional infrastructure of global progress. Meaning, when the world systems fail, it's Filipinos who quietly rebuild them through care, consistency, and community. Even South Korea's president made a statement this year that sent shockwaves online. In a televised speech, he said, "Filipinos have become the quiet strength of Asia. Their endurance, faith, and work ethic remind us what true progress means." That line went viral across Asia, not because it was flattering, but because it was overdue. The Philippines has gone from being a workforce to a world force, and that changes everything. But here's the raw truth. Admiration is never enough. Respect must translate into reform, because if Filipinos are holding up global industries, then it's time we also hold a seat at the global table. Let's look at what's already happening. South Korea's Ministry of Trade just signed a new bilateral framework with the Philippines focused on co-leadership, not labor. Filipino engineers will now co-manage major renewable energy projects in Jaila and Busan. Why does that matter? Because for decades, Filipinos were always under contract, underappreciated, underpaid. Now, for the first time, we're working alongside, not beneath. That's evolution. But it's not just economics, it's culture. Koreans used to export entertainment. Now they're consuming Filipino stories. Streaming platforms in Seoul recently bought 3 Filipino docuseries highlighting Filipino nurses, teachers, and caregivers shaping modern Korea. One of them, The Hands That Heal Seoul, hit 12 million Korean views in a week. The emotional feedback? Overwhelming gratitude. Koreans saying things like, "We didn't realize how much of our society they keep standing." And that's when the conversation changed. This isn't just admiration, it's acknowledgement. Even the Korean business elite are taking notice. Hyundai's CEO publicly credited his Filipino-led overseas team for setting record profits in 2025. Korean media outlets are now calling Filipino professionals the global gold standard in adaptability. But here's what makes it all poetic. While other nations chase power, Filipinos create connection. And that's what the world's been starving for. See, success without compassion burns out fast. But Filipinos, we've mastered the art of balancing both. We work with excellence, but carry empathy in every task. That's why even in the harshest industries, caregiving, seafaring, construction, we don't just deliver output, we deliver impact. South Korea learned that too late. Their systems broke under the weight of pressure. Ours survived under the weight of purpose. Now imagine this, a future where Filipino leadership isn't the exception, it's the expectation. Where OFWs aren't just workers abroad, but global decision makers, shaping industries, rewriting policies, and redefining leadership itself. And the truth is that future is already happening. The Asian Development Bank just published a forecast naming the Philippines as the next innovation hub of Southeast Asia. Why? Because global industries from healthcare to digital media are relocating teams to Manila, Cebu, and Davao, citing Filipino emotional intelligence and cultural flexibility as key competitive advantages. Translation, the world doesn't just want Filipino labor anymore, it wants the Filipino mindset. Even Korean companies are now recruiting not just for skills, but for values. In one viral job listing, a Seoul-based firm wrote, "Filipino candidates preferred known for teamwork, patience, and optimism." Let that sink in. A nation that once prioritized automation now prizes compassion. The world's finally aligning with what we've known all along. Progress without humanity is regression. But let's get real. This moment is fragile. We can't stop here. Respect must evolve into recognition, and recognition must evolve into representation. Filipinos must not just be part of global conversations, they must lead them. Because while South Korea, Japan, and the US adjust to population decline, one country still has what the world needs: people with passion, purpose, and possibility. And that country is the Philippines. Our young generation, educated, multilingual, and digitally fluent, is ready. But what we need next is direction. We can't let global respect turn into another export. We must build systems that bring our talent home. Because here's the final twist. The Philippines has already achieved what South Korea couldn't. Hope that doesn't expire. We don't just rebuild economies, we rebuild faith. We don't just fuel industries, we fuel humanity. And in a world drowning in burnout and bureaucracy, that's the one resource money can't buy: the Filipino heart. So the next time someone asks how the Philippines did it, how we managed to do what South Korea couldn't, tell them this: it wasn't luck, it wasn't timing, it was the people, the faith, the fire that refuses to die. Because when Filipinos rise, the world doesn't just notice, it adjusts. Type vision in the comments if you believe this is only the beginning, the dawn of a new era where the Filipino way isn't just respected, it's replicated.